My name is Thomas Walker, and for 3 decades I carried a keychain that opened more doors than my memory could catalogue. When the district called me for one last inventory at the old Pine Hollow Elementary, closed since 1995, condemned for infiltration and mold, the keychain felt heavier than ever, as if the metal remembered the children who no longer walk through hallways that still smell of cheap disinfectant and damp paper. On the GPS, the school doesn't even appear. You have to leave the highway, follow a gravel road between pine trees, cross a wooden bridge over a narrow bayou, and park in front of a facade that was once white and now looks like a map of rust, lichen, and abandonment. The sign with the mascot, Mustangs, hangs crooked in the wind that doesn't blow, and the windows, painted with dust, have turned into dull mirrors that reflect an older face than I feel. The lock on the front door gave way with a sigh. Inside, the air felt like it had been stored for 30 years, yet it was still too warm for an autumn morning. The hallways were tunnels of cracked linoleum and posters from forgotten campaigns. Recycle Day, Science Fair 1994, where termites had made constellations. I came to count desks, record blackboards, photograph broken fans. But the body learned something else first. In the silence, the school breathes. At the water fountain in the east corridor, the drain grate was bent into a triangle. Around it, parallel greasy streaks shone under the flashlight, as if something heavy had always passed through the same place, polishing the dirt until it became a path. I lowered my ear, and the drain returned a warm breath with the smell of stagnant water, crushed grass, and a metallic undertone that scratched my throat. My nose recognized the bayou before my eyes did. On the maintenance map, the old arrows said everything. The drainage from the yard ran into a covered ditch at the edge of the court, followed an old reinforced concrete pipe, crossed under the music room, and ended in the slow arm of the river, behind the pines. Condemned pipe, recurring leak, someone had written, perhaps me, in blue ink that the mold tried to eat. I pressed my palm. The heat came from within, along with a moist click, tongue on cement, that my mind tried to translate as expansion. The problem is that caps and grates are not the endpoint when water decides to carve out another path. In old schools, everything has the blueprint of a vein. In the music room, the floor was polished in a wide arc that started from the side door and disappeared behind a fallen cabinet. I pushed the cabinet and found a concrete inspection cover with 2 rusty rings, sweating beneath like a feverish animal. I didn't lift it. The library was a fish tank of swollen paper. On the rug, a little ball of fur and bones, owl vomit, and beside it, the same wide polish. In the small children's room, the clock had stopped at 3:45. On the chalkboard, an incomplete sentence still lived in pale chalk. Close the... and a shaky line as if the hand had lost its courage. The children's bathroom held its own echo. Ceramic returns childhood. And the central drain grate, twisted, showed 2 broken metal teeth like an old bite. On the surrounding cement, a newly born damp S traced the exact curve I had learned to respect in other places, a signature of passage. I didn't speak out loud, but I thought the words "old janitors" repeat as practical liturgy. Don't answer, don't poke, don't hurry. In the yard, a shade tree, a live oak, embraced the sky and the roof with branches that still resembled the line of swing ropes. The tire garden had one turned upside down, forming a mouth of packed earth. Children called it a house and cooked leaves with twigs inside. Now the edge of the tire gleamed greasy, as if a large mass had rubbed its shoulder there, repeatedly, before slipping downward. Among dry leaves I found 3 things: a school hairpin with worn-out glitter, a crumpled piece of aluminum with small regular bites, 2 by 2, and a thick opaque scale with a straight scar, a scratch of iron, that the sun couldn't erase. I put the scale in my pocket and only then felt the shame. Old houses like to keep their trophies. The inventory asked for photos. I photographed. With every flash, dust fell from the ceiling of the hallway like bad snow. With every room, the air changed temperature. When I returned to the music room lid, the ring was damp like a tongue. Without thinking, I pulled it a centimeter. The breath that came out had 3 notes of smell: old water, crushed grass, warm metal, and the heat touched my fingers as if testing. I closed it the same second, and the cabinet next to it groaned a millimeter, like someone shifting position in bed. That's when the drain in the bathroom, in the distance, responded with 3 paused bubbles, a perfect code drawing no one had taught. The body wanted to whistle, call, confirm. The mouth stayed silent. The building, the whole, struck once, low, on the ear bone, and stopped. The bayou behind the pines seemed to breathe in unison. The wind didn't stir the treetops, but the light on the ground changed in a pulse. The map said that water from there had always passed beneath the rooms, through ducts, through drains, and the thing that learns the map becomes its master. By the end of the morning, I sat on the entrance step to write condemned next to items no one would use again, and the incomplete sentence on the chalkboard, which I had photographed, decided to finish itself inside my head. Close the passages, close the passages. I'm not a man who listens to voices. I'm a man of locks. Even so, before I left, I put yellow tape on the tire house, marked a red X on the crooked drain, stuck a notice on the lid, and locked the door with 2 turns. The keychain felt lighter for a minute. In the afternoon, it weighed double. I arrived early on the second day, with the sun still trapped behind the pines and the bayou breathing that sweet, deceptive cold. The padlock accepted the key as if it remembered my hand. Inside, the air was too warm for the time of day. Long hallways make the body walk smaller. The cracked linoleum echoed my steps in 2 voices, one from above, human, and another from below, hollow, seeming to come from the veins of the school. At the water fountain in the east corridor, the drain grate, bent into a triangle, gleamed with moisture even without use. Around it, the greasy streaks had grown a nail, like a fresh mark from something that always passes by there, polishing the dirt. I pressed my ear against it. The breath rose warm with 3 notes of scent in line: stagnant water, crushed grass, warm metal. The music room kept the same inspection lid, sweating beneath like a polite fever. The iron rings, cold at first, warmed in my fingers as if someone were breathing from the other side, and a moist click, tongue on cement, came at the end of the cycle, obedient. I pushed the cabinet that acted as weight and saw on the floor the sharpest polished trace, an arc that went in and out of the lid with indecent precision. In the library, the swollen books had their spines open like dry wounds. On the rug, another little ball of fur and bones, owl working on the ceiling, and beside it, the wide, polished trail that cut the room in a half-moon, going toward the door. It was as if the entire building had turned into a hallway. In the children's bathroom, the tiles returned a childhood that no longer exists. The crooked drain grate, 2 broken teeth, held semicircular marks, perfect pairs, spaced a small finger-width apart, like a trained metal bite. On the cement, a damp S, freshly born, repeated the signature that had already passed through the tire house and the water fountain. I crouched, touched the edge with my sleeve, and the water rose a finger, swelled and returned, drawing a semicircle that lightly brushed my boot. It wasn't old pipes unclogging. It was someone testing the world below with patience. The incomplete sentence on the chalkboard in the small children's room, "Close the," seemed whiter than yesterday, as if the dust had chosen to reorganize itself just to provoke me. "Close the passages," my head completed, without help. I'm not a man who listens to voices. I'm a man of yellow tape. Even so, I secured the corridor drains with temporary grates I found in the storage room, 2 screws on each. Simple stuff. Stuff eases the conscience. The tire house got a square of galvanized mesh that came with the label rodent repellent. I felt the irony in my body. The greasy marks on the edge of the tire gleamed like a recent finger on glass. Upon touching it, the smell of cheap talcum powder and school cream rose with shame. Someone had been here not long ago, human, and touched where they shouldn't have. Behind the gym, the service corridor had a metal door leading to a technical gap beneath the stage. Old lock, old key, obedient rust. I crouched with the flashlight. Ducts, channels, a dead electrical panel, and the same wide arc of polish, like a road for a body without legs. The ground, made of packed dirt, had 2 shallow craters side by side, like repeated supports, and a thick, opaque scale with a straight scar, lying like a forgotten coin. I put it back in place with the respect of one who doesn't take trophies from old houses. The air down there was warmer, in a way that wasn't from the climate. It was from the body. I returned to the inspection lid. Without lifting it, I just pressed my ear and counted the silence. It came in cycles, soft brushing, pause, moist click, a current of air rising, and a rest that seemed calculated. When the sun rose a hand's breadth, the ceiling of the east corridor wept fine dust. A continuous line as if something large had passed slowly over the planks. 2 steps ahead, the linoleum responded with a tock. Not a heel, not a hammer. Pressure coming from below, in the screws. The animal instinct wanted to return the 3 taps with the knuckle of my fingers. I controlled my hand in my pocket until it hurt. "Don't answer," I said softly, as if teaching myself the rules I had learned at other addresses. By noon, the wind in the pines fell silent. The bayou held the mirror. The school was without birds, and when the old school is without birds, it speaks without anyone on top. The lid let out a longer sigh. The breath that rose touched the back of my hand and withdrew like someone testing salt. The bathroom drain responded with 3 bubbles, obedient with the correct pause between them. The water fountain at the far end released a halo of moisture on the floor, which formed in the same S-curve that I had already recognized as the signature letter. The entire map decided to synchronize: drains, ducts, lid, tire house, water fountain, as if someone down below were playing an old organ with their elbows. Layers of practice saved my mind. I took photos, wrote notes, drew arrows in my notebook, marked times. I wrote negative pressure, vibration, subsidence, as one lights a technical candle against superstitious thought. Even so, my hand trembled in my pocket when the keychain struck the metal of my belt. Twice pause, the 3rd time, unintentionally. From the floor, the school responded with a timid click, displaced a meter to the right. "That's enough for today," I said, too loud for an empty building. I closed doors, sealed the makeshift grates, tied the yellow tape wherever it fit. As I left, the Mustang's sign swayed in a wind that hadn't come yet, and the padlock made a tongue-like noise on the roof of my mouth before locking. So I came back with reinforcements. 2 guys from the district's maintenance team, clipboards, basic vibration sensors, and isolation tape. "No lifting the lid," I said. They laughed, as if amused by an old janitor with quirks, and nodded when they saw the sweat on the iron rings. We spread sensors in the critical areas, one in the east corridor stuck to the cracked linoleum, another at the crooked water fountain, a 3rd in the technical gap under the stage, a 4th, stubbornly, on the inspection lid in the music room, just to record nothing. On the inventory sheet, I wrote words that save jobs: silting, moisture damage, collapse risk. In my pocket, the scale I didn't take itched like guilt. The first sensor went off at 10:07, a clean, deep wave that scratched the phone screen like a heart multiplied by wood. The one at the water fountain responded with a fine sawtooth, small bubbles in series, and the one at the technical gap marked a slow rise without peaks like a heavy train climbing a slope. The one on the lid, of course, stayed at 0 until it didn't. A short vertical spike followed by nothing, as if someone leaned their shoulder inside and changed their mind. We looked at each other without laughing. "Wind in the ducts," said one. "Wind doesn't make S's on the floor," I replied, pointing at the freshly made curve in the linoleum next to us, shining like wet letters. He laughed and didn't stick his hand in. At 10:43, the sensor on the lid drew another needle. The one at the water fountain released a long wave, and the water fountain sweated a perfect halo, as if it were sweating fear. We closed the yard with tape, more for theater than for safety. One of the guys went down into the technical gap with a headlamp. "Something's been moved recently," he whispered. "Packed earth, slicked, trail going from the relief grate to the back wall." He showed me his phone. On the screen, the wide polish was indecent. Next to it, 2 shallow craters side by side, as fresh as hot bread. "Don't stick your hand in," I asked, without humor. In the library, the owl pellet had turned into 2. On the rug, a new greasy streak cut the childish design all the way to the door. The phrase, "close the," seemed to, in the phone lens, complete itself and vanish. Dust trick, any sensible person would say. "That's it," said the other guy, closing his clipboard. "Close it, report it, request demolition of the block." The word demolition crossed the corridor like a swallowed hammer. The whole school seemed to hold its breath. I kept looking at the lid as one looks at a mouth that has bitten slowly. "Before you strike, listen," I said. They lifted their eyes with practical boredom. The sensor, as if it had been agreed upon, rose a single clean vertical spike, just once. In the afternoon, we collected the sensors. The reports would say everything the city wants to read: old school, risk, water, mold. At night, the wind in the pines still hadn't returned. At home, I closed the window, but the curtains moved inward in a long pulse as if the bayou had mistakenly changed the air in the room. The memory showed the edge of the tire gleaming greasy, the galvanized mesh groaning when I fastened it, the damp S in the linoleum trying to dry but failing. The whole body learned the rhythm: rise, fall, pause. And, as happens with those who learn a new language too late, I began to understand too much when it decided to speak. On the last day, the district sent a team with a plumb line, tape measure, fluorescent spray, and the final word: floor removal for on-site inspection. The big kids' game began with cuts in the linoleum of the music room, opening cement windows to see what's inside. I asked them to leave the lid for last. Procedure, they said, and I accepted the trade. Extra tape on the tire house, a new grate over the crooked drain, a rubber plug on the water fountain. The children who no longer exist would have hated it. The owner of the map, perhaps, too. When the cutting disc bit into the cement, the entire building bit back. A low groan ran from the ceiling beams to the soles of the boots, the forgotten sensor vibrating in the backpack, and the bayou, outside, raised a finger of water that no one saw. The window of linoleum lifted, showing the old duct reinforced concrete with a thin sheet of dark water running slowly. At first glance, nothing. At second glance, the wide polish on the duct walls, clean streaks like tracks, greasy shine at knee height. Flow, someone said. Decades of flow, I answered without thinking. The guy with the cutter turned off the machine to drink water. In that thin silence, the duct spoke politely. A soft brushing, a moist click of tongue, and the current of air rising as if testing who's on top. We didn't open the lid. We didn't need to. The map was already fully drawn on the floor and in my head. We closed the cement windows with temporary plugs, which cried moisture in the corners like stubborn little tears. The report came out with the right words: structural compromise, infiltration, obstructed underground passages, recommendation for partial demolition with duct sealing. The city sleeps better reading it that way. The email with the final order arrived at night. I was holding the keychain when the wind entered through the closed window, moving both curtain and paper at once. The mug on the sideboard took 2 small steps and stopped. The body wanted to respond. I didn't. The next day, the noise of heavy machinery woke the pines. The men in helmets measure, mark, strike. I enjoy watching people work with method. It calms me. When the sledgehammer hit the first square of cut linoleum, the building held its breath again. "Before you strike, listen," I said cheaply. The breaker operator smiled without humor. The blade came down, bit into the concrete, and the duct, not the floor, responded first with a warm breath that brought the 3 old smells: water, grass, metal. The sledgehammer stayed in the air 1 second longer than it should have. The man brought it back to his shoulder, confused without knowing why. At the water fountain, the rubber plug swelled a millimeter and settled. At the bathroom drain, the bubbles rose twice, paused the third, disciplined. I don't know if the city will strike until it's silent, or if the owner of the map will open another mouth 2 blocks away. I know that lids never close veins, neither of people, nor of schools, nor of bayous. Close the passages is not an invitation for demolition. It's advice for those in a hurry. Did I give up the scale I didn't take? No. I left it where it was, in the technical gap, as a toll coin for those who pass without showing themselves. I kept the keychain and the incomplete phrase, which sometimes finishes itself when the river's wind hits the pine needles. When someone asks if it's true, I answer with the only things that weigh without a photograph: the smell in the drain, the letter S in the linoleum, the warm heat in the lid's ring, and the childish impulse to knock 3 times and learn that, in certain places, the world responds. And if they insist, don't hurry, don't be hungry. Close what can be closed and leave before the school teaches you another language.